Okay, so we'll start off with a little bit of introduction about the speakers. I have a bachelor's degree from Rutgers and a master's from Stevens. I worked for Yahoo and Google, and currently I'm working for Apple. My career has been mostly in site reliability engineering, and we're really glad to have Monis Ali with us. Monis, please go ahead and introduce yourself. You're on mute, Monis.
Hi guys, good afternoon. Yeah, Monis here, Monis Ali. Yeah, my background is, as you see, I did a bachelor of engineering in electronics. I have almost like 25 years of experience in IT industry. I work for mostly for the software development companies and healthcare industries. Pretty much now I'm a seasoned storage engineer by background, worked on a lot of Unix flavors and currently managing the cloud operations, especially in AWS. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you very much, Monis Bhai. So before we get started about what the education requirements are for infrastructure engineering, I get this question asked a lot by kids, especially in high school, as to what exactly is infrastructure engineering. And I'm going to see if anybody here knows what infrastructure engineering is. This is also known as site reliability engineering, but can any one of the participants unmute themselves and tell me what they know about infrastructure engineering?
Infrastructure engineering is like for coordinating and designing.
Coordinating and designing what?
Buildings, apartments, and stuff.
Okay, so I'm glad we asked that question. So this is not a mechanical engineering or civil engineering presentation. This has to do with information technology, and infrastructure and information technology is different. Infrastructure and information technology is different than infrastructure in real life. When I say real life, I mean in the physical world, not in the computer world. So this talk is not about like how to do buildings, physical buildings or roads or highways. This talk is about how to do infrastructure in information technology. So what does that really mean? That means infrastructure has to do with the computers, the hard drives, the network that connects all the different services or programs that you use, right? So for instance, if you go to apple.com or you go to yahoo.com, you're accessing a computer somewhere. That computer has some storage data, and that computer has a network across which the data transfers. It also has a processor. So infrastructure engineering is about putting all of those things together, and also about the programs that are actually running apple.com or yahoo.com or google.com, and making sure that they are highly available and reliable. Because programmers in general will write the program, and I'm speaking in general terms here, and then they'll pass it on to infrastructure engineers who will then build the infrastructure or the computers or that those programs will run on. Does that make sense? Monis, do you want to add anything here?
Yeah, as you said, just again what you said, it's just that make sure you have your IT infrastructure running in somewhere, like in data center, right? The physical data center, or nowadays you call it as a cloud, right? Where you get an on-demand source for your compute, storage, and the network, where you develop your applications there, right? Run it for in a customer facing or for software development.
Yeah, thank you, Monis Bhai. So I hope that helps clarify a little bit about infrastructure engineering. Any other questions on infrastructure engineering? Like, you guys have a rough idea at least on what it entails? Okay, so we'll move on, and if any questions pop up, just unmute yourself and ask. So what sort of education requirements are needed to be an infrastructure engineer? By the way, these roles are generally called site reliability engineers, or SRE, or DevOps roles, or system administration. It helps to have a bachelor's degree in computer science or electrical engineering. It makes a difference in many cases. It also helps if you've been to a name brand school. Not that you have to, but it makes a difference in getting your foot in the door initially. It also helps if you have certifications. And this is not the only way to get your foot in the door. If you have contributed to open source projects, by open source projects, I mean if you go to, for instance, github.com and you look up open source projects to which you can start contributing code, it makes a big difference if you have some of those things available before the interview so that you can actually demonstrate knowledge on this particular subject. Companies that hire a lot of infrastructure engineers include companies such as Google and Facebook and Apple and Amazon and Netflix and these cloud companies like Pinterest and Instagram and WhatsApp, all of these, and TikTok, all of these really need a lot of infrastructure engineers in order to make sure that their environment is running properly. Any questions so far? Okay, so let's move on to, yeah, go ahead.
Sorry, site reliability. How do you tie that?
Yeah, so site reliability is obviously how do you make something highly available and reliable, right? So site refers to the company's domain. For instance, let's say apple.com. You know, Apple sells products through its website where and that revenue is worth billions of dollars. So that site has to be available. When I say site, I mean like store.apple.com. That's called a site, a website. So that has to be highly available and reliable. Like you should be able to go on Apple's website and buy a computer, for instance, or you should be able to go on Google's site and search for whatever you're looking for. So site reliability ties into infrastructure engineering in the sense that you as an infrastructure engineer will come up with the design of a site that is highly available and reliable so that people can go and search on it or can go and buy products on it. That's how it ties together. Does that answer your question, I hope?
It did, thank you.
Sure. All right, what's the aptitude you need? You need to be inquisitive, highly rational. Introverts tend to do well in this field. You don't have to be outgoing because you'll be spending a lot of your time in front of a computer versus talking to people. Although communication is an essential skill, I highly recommend you get better at it. If no matter how good you are, there's always room for improvement. You have to be of helping nature because a lot of SREs tend to work closely with developers, and if there's a problem, they need to assist or take charge of resolving a problem. You should enjoy reading because there's a lot of reading. Technologies change a lot in this field. They're rapidly evolving, and you need to be able to read and learn new technologies. This is not something that you learn once in school and you're done with. Like for instance, the human body, right? The human body evolves very slowly, but a brain is a brain is a brain. Like it hasn't changed maybe in 100 years, like even longer, right? But on the other hand, technologies and infrastructure engineering have changed a lot. We have public cloud, we have private cloud. So you have to be able to learn quickly. All right. Monis, do you want to add anything here?
Well, yeah. Well, I would say that a lot of automation has come into play. A lot of APIs are there for you to work, right? Basically, it all comes down to like touch base and see what platform you're looking for, right? To work up this IT industry, like which OS you want to pick up, like Linux or Windows, right? So the OS is very important to pick up which OS operating system you're interested in that, right? And on top of that, you can work on getting into access to cloud and all that.
Excellent, thank you very much. All right, so what are some interests and skills that you should perhaps try and develop? You should enjoy working with internet technologies. What do I mean by internet technologies? If you're not sure, because you're still learning this field, I mean, in layman's terms, you should be, what's called a computer person. Like, you should understand how to build a website, right? You should understand how to put together a computer. You should understand storage of data, like what is a gigabyte, what is a megabyte, what is a terabyte. So those are the things you should know, the difference between public and private cloud. Like public cloud, for instance, as Monis Ali said, that's something that's hosted by another company. So in essence, they're computers that are sitting in a data center. Data center is like a big building that has all these computers. So Amazon, for instance, has a data center somewhere in the US, or many data centers where they have a bunch of computers, and you remotely access those computers, right? And you program on them. So that's called a public cloud, versus a private cloud where, let's say, if your own company was leasing some warehouse space, let's say in San Jose or anywhere else where you had your own computer set up, that would be a private cloud. So coding skills are not necessary for infrastructure engineers, but they're highly recommended, especially if you want to apply to what's known as the FANG companies, Facebook, Apple, Amazon, Netflix, Google, because infrastructure engineers do get quizzed on their coding skills. You don't need to be as deep in coding as software engineers, but basic level of coding, especially in Python or Go, those are the two languages that are very common with infrastructure engineers, will make a big difference. Anything to add here?
Yeah. As far as the coding concerned, as far as the infrastructure as a code, right? Nowadays, you can see a lot of different applications available, like you have a Terraform or Ansible. So those kind of coding especially on the Linux platform I was talking about, will definitely help to maintain your infrastructure and build your infrastructure on top of it.
Yes, thank you very much. That's correct. So some of the technologies that Monis Ali mentioned, like Terraform, it's a software that was developed by a company called HashiCorp, and that software makes it easy for you to create virtual computers in, let's say, in Amazon or in Google Cloud. So those are new technologies that you should be willing to learn that will help you in infrastructure engineering. Okay, next slide. It's the earning potential. So there is a huge demand for infrastructure engineers, also known as site reliability engineers, in the current market. And it's not common to get multiple offers. New college graduates in Silicon Valley, and Silicon Valley is a little bit of an outlier, right? Because of the high cost of living here. But you can expect to get paid, let's say you have a bachelor's from UC Irvine or UC Berkeley or UC San Diego or San Jose State, doesn't really matter, in computer science or electrical engineering, and you get hired as a site reliability engineer, you can expect like a base salary between 80 to 120K. Again, these are some general numbers that I'm telling you. Of course, they will be outliers. And then you can expect a sign-on bonus from 10K to 100K, and then stocks or restricted stock units anywhere from like 50K to 150K. Now take these numbers with a big grain of salt, because if you're working for a startup company, they may pay you less than this, and they may not give you a sign-on bonus because they don't have the money, and they may give you a lot of options that are worth potentially hundreds of thousands of dollars if the company does well, of course. So take that with a grain of salt. And the pay ranges between industry to industry. For instance, in internet technology companies, like the FANG companies I talked about, you'll generally get higher pay than, let's say, if you're working for pharmaceutical companies, or if you're working for Wall Street companies. So that also makes a difference. Monis, anything you want to add here?
Well, I think you have said everything. This numbers looks high for me a little bit, but yeah.
Yeah.
For Silicon Valley, yeah, I think this is what you get. Yeah.
That's right. Okay, work-life balance. Next thing, if you're going to work for, what is work-life balance? Work-life balance is your ability to go to work 9 to 5, for instance, I'm making up some numbers, and then have your own personal life, like being able to go bike riding or hiking in the evening, or spending time with your family, and on weekends being able to do what you want, like maybe spend time working on your house or in your yard. So that's work-life balance, is being able to do personal things and work things. So if you work for startup companies, it's very difficult to have a good work-life balance, because you'll be spending a lot of hours working for that company. Again, I'm generalizing, right? So a normal work week is considered 35 to 40 hours throughout the industry. You work 9 to 5 Monday through Friday, or 10 to 6, and you take an hour off for lunch, for instance. But if you work for startups, you will end up working, for instance, 10 to 12 hours a day. Again, this is generalization. There are outliers on each end. If you work for established companies, depends on the company's culture. Like Google is known to have, for the most part, a really good work-life balance, but Netflix is not known to have a really good work-life balance. People at Netflix tend to work a lot of hours. So it depends on that. But in general, I'd say the industry work-life balance for infrastructure engineers is quite favorable.
Sure.
Yeah. Feel free to jump in anytime on this, Vai.
Yeah, I think, yeah, I agree with you this one. But again, the norm now is like working from home culture. And for the new graduates who are looking for a job right now, since the remote working positions are quite more, right? So now the horizon is very huge. Like you don't have to be in particular city where your parents are there, you know, to find a job. So it's really now, it's open, right? So a lot of opportunities. And as far as work-life balance concerned, yeah, we have to be very careful with that. Make sure you work only 8 hours, and, you know, take yourself with the mental and physical health as well.
Yeah, great point. Okay, so where are the jobs located for infrastructure engineers? Obviously, Silicon Valley is a big hub. Yeah, I moved to Silicon Valley from New Jersey because of the jobs here, and I was really fortunate for that. Austin is a big tech hub as well, and it's growing. North Carolina, especially Raleigh. Portland in Oregon, Seattle in Washington, New York City, all of these are big tech hubs, including Pittsburgh. And a friend of mine recently shared an article, a news article about some other cities that I wasn't aware of that are also big, that are also growing in terms of tech hubs. But like Monis Bhai said, there are some companies that have adopted a full-time work from home policy, or you can work from anywhere in the country. Like for instance, if you work for Okta has a full-time remote, like you don't have to come into the office ever, so to speak. So you could be living in the middle of Alaska. As long as you have good Wi-Fi internet connection, you can live there and work. But if you want to be in the heart of it, you know, these are just some cities. Of course, this is not an all-inclusive list. There are many other cities that come to my mind, and Monis, I feel free to add any other cities here.
Well, I see one more city is Salt Lake City.
Yes.
Right? It's kind of not a Silicon Valley, but it is called the Silicon Slope of late. Most of your cloud startups, right? I believe they started from there as well, some of them. So it's very upcoming city, right? That particular area is developing fast, especially the San Diego and Salt Lake City area. So maybe look for that area as well if you have any positions. It's not too far, like 2 hours from the area in flight here.
Let me pause and for a moment here. Any questions from any of the audience members? Don't be shy about anything we've covered so far. We talked about work-life balance. We talked about earning potentials, interest and skills, aptitude needed, education required. Any questions on any of these topics? Okay, So if any questions come up, feel free to ask. Let's look at the next topic, which is trends of the industry. You want to take this one, Ismail?
Yeah. Yeah, I see that. Yeah, infrastructure engineers in high in demand, right? Yeah, definitely. Yeah, whether it is SRE or DevOps, right now, as a system engineer or the what do you call this system administrator, now it has changed into a DevOps culture, right? As apart from your operation side, you have to have a little bit of development skill as well, right? That's what the trend is looking for. So basically, you're building any infrastructure or something, you have to have a DevOps culture in mind with some tools, as I mentioned, like Terraform as a code or Ansible or Python, right? So that's what people are looking for to develop your infrastructure in cloud, especially in AWS, GPC. So because they come up with all the APIs open for you to connect, like you just have to have a kind of keys available for that as a user. They call it as a IAM user keys. That's pretty much you need, and you'll get into it and that network and start developing your infrastructure there. Yeah, with automation.
So to add to what Monis Bhai said, what is DevOps? DevOps stands for development plus operations. So development is writing software code. Operations is taking care of the code when it's running on the computers. So DevOps stands for a field where people do both. So normally, in the past, traditionally, you've had people who write code, they're called developers, and people who maintain the infrastructure or the computers that the code runs on, and those are called operations people. And they normally didn't get along very well. But this new trend of one engineer that can do both, that can write code as well as maintain the code and the infrastructure that it runs on, is called DevOps. So that's what it stands for. AWS is a short form for Amazon Web Services. It's their public cloud. I think I just explained public cloud a couple of slides ago. GCP stands for Google Cloud Platform, which is Google's competitor to Amazon. So hopefully that gives you guys a little bit more context on what this is. All right, next slide. Work environment. In Silicon Valley, the culture amongst infrastructure engineers is very casual and very helpful. The community in general is an awesome community. I'm really blessed to be part of that. And wherever there are human beings, there'll always be politics, but this is not a cutthroat profession where people are trying to pull each other down. There are a lot of user groups. A user group is basically like a collection of users of engineers that share a common interest, right? So for instance, if you like to work on Amazon Web Services, there can be a meetup group. I hope you guys are familiar with meetup.com. It's a place for people that have like-minded interests to come together and form a group and then meet on an occasional basis. So a lot of those meetup groups that get together quite often to share knowledge amongst themselves. And the culture in this industry is really helpful and cooperative. I'm really fortunate to be part of that. All right, so that's all I had. Monis, anything you want to talk about the culture?
Well, no, I think you said it here. That's in general, yeah, that's what it is.
Good.
Azher and Monis, thank you. This is very helpful. Just for the audience, right? This is my understanding of your world. We spoke about software engineering, then we spoke about about artificial intelligence and all these concepts, then about product. So if I understand this correctly, is this space the backbone of technology? Like, I can have a great idea, I can come up with a fantastic product, I can have fantastic software engineers write code, right? But if people have to use my product, it should be available. And is this what makes that product available to the people? Like Uber is available because of this, Discord is, Facebook is, Instagram. Is this the backbone of technology, would you say?
Yes, Abhay, yeah, you're right. This is the backend, this is the backbone, right? This is the backup, this is the infrastructure. We're talking about the compute, the storage, the networking, right? The access to your website, and as Azharbai mentioned, the reliability, right? It should be highly available, right? Whereas in Amazon or any other cloud, right? It has to be in multi-availability zone, right? Kind of a multi-region also. You can spread your application across multi-region as well, right? And apart from this compute, storage, infrastructure, there comes a lot of the responsibilities like security is there. It's a very big thing. Like you have to make sure that your environment is totally secure. So all that is part of this DevOps culture. And availability is one which Azharbai was telling. That's another thing, right?
So if I was to choose this as a career for the next 20 years, can I assume that at least for the next 10, 15, 20 years,
Yeah.
I can.
Yeah, you have to be an ops engineer, have to be there. Because whether it is you are maintaining a private cloud, you have your own data center, for example, right? Or a public cloud, right? You have to have an operation engineer to manage this.
Yes, Khalili, very good questions. Thank you for asking. And Moez Bhai has given a lot of useful data on that. But you're right. All of these things, like your car, if you own a Tesla car and that car is communicating with Tesla in the back end, right? Or if you have at home, let's say you have a smart refrigerator that is made by Samsung, that thing is talking back to Samsung. Or Netflix, let's take a really easy example, Netflix. You're streaming movies or TV shows from Netflix. When I say, hopefully I shouldn't have to explain streaming. Streaming is downloading, right? So that movie is on some computer, and that computer is owned by Amazon. And that's why it's called the public cloud, because it's not owned by Netflix. If it was owned by Netflix, it would have been called the private cloud. And that maintenance of that computer on that, the software that runs on it, is all part of this infrastructure engineering, is all part of this SRE, site reliability engineering. It's all part of this developing and operating, or DevOps. So that's what it is, yes. Any other questions on this? So I'll share a small story with you all. Hopefully that'll give you an idea about the evolution of this profession. Initially, SREs, or infrastructure engineers, when I say initially, I'm talking about like the 90s, were called system administrators, because we didn't really have the concept of public or private cloud, right? But you had a system. A system is basically one or more computers running some software on it. And administration is the aspect of managing it. So this profession was known as system administrators, and those who were in it were called sysadmins for short. Then the term SRE was coined by Google, who, and at Google, there was this concept that you're not just maintaining or administering a system, but you're taking care of the reliability of the system. And Google came up with google.com, which was a website. Therefore, you have site reliability engineers, right? But those engineers were responsible for making sure, like Moez Bhai mentioned, that the site was secure, no hackers could get in. Because imagine if you're storing your bank information on let's say, chase.com or bankofamerica.com. You don't want any hackers to go in and steal your bank data, right? Like your money from there. That's why security is important. You also want to make sure that you can go and access the bank website whenever you want, or you can go to google.com and search for whatever your interest is whenever you feel like it. So that's where reliability comes in. You have to make sure that the website is always available for users to use. And you have to make sure that the data is backed up. Like if the computer crashes, that no data is lost. So that's where the other aspect comes in.
Data protection, yeah.
Protection, that's right. So hopefully that helps. Now, somebody asked, can you create a free account on public cloud? Yes, in Amazon Web Services or AWS, and in Google Cloud or GCP, you can create a free account and they give you access to X number of credits, which translates to X number of dollars for free that you can use to play around. And I highly recommend you all do that. They have some really good videos on their website to do that. Any other questions?
Just a side question. Do startups typically, when they're, just forming, assembling, and, in their nascent state, are they inclined to spend so much in infrastructure, or they typically go through infrastructure as a service subscription models?
So I'll sort of for our high school kids, I'll break down some of that. When you are starting a company, you've got an option, right? You can buy computers like from Dell or from HP or IBM, and you can set up those computers in your office, and then you can write code on those computers. So that's your own in-house, right? In-house it's called. Versus what Gerard mentioned about software as a service. Software as a service is basically where you use somebody else's software and you pay them on a per usage basis. For instance, if you want to hire people, you need to keep track of payroll, right? So you can do that by buying, for instance, some software called QuickBooks from a company called Intuit, and then you can input all of your employee information in it. Or you can go with a company that makes it easy for you and you don't have to buy any software. You just buy a temporary license that you pay every month for, and they manage the software, like Zenefits, right? So with those companies, that's called software as a service, because you're not installing anything on your computer. You just open up your browser, Safari or Chrome or whatever you have, and you go to like zenefits.com and you log in and you pay them for usage of their software on a monthly basis. And when you don't need to use the software, you stop paying them, and that's it. So that makes it easy. So a lot of startups tend to go with the software as a service, because you don't have to buy a computer, you don't have to buy anything. And that really doesn't impact the job of an SRE. In fact, that puts SREs or infrastructure engineers more in demand, because those software as a service companies like Salesforce or Zenefits, they need to hire SREs to maintain those computers so that others can access it. Does that answer your question, I hope?
Yes.
Yeah. And one more thing is those startup companies have actually promoted this concept of developers plus ops or dev ops in one engineer, because they don't have enough money to hire one full-time developer and one full-time operations engineer. So they're looking for engineers who have both those skills. So they want somebody who can write Java code, for instance, in Amazon Web Services, and also being able to bring up like a virtual computer in Amazon and understand security in Amazon and storage. So those startup companies have promoted this concept of DevOps in one engineer. Great question. Any other questions?
Somebody raised their hand.
Yes, please unmute.
Yeah, I have a question. This question keeps on coming up to my mind. Like I ask this question a lot for like engineers, but as an infrastructure engineer, do you prefer written or verbal communication?
Reading and writing are essential skills in computer science, in software, and you cannot get around those skills. So to answer your question, do you prefer verbal or written communication? Well, a lot of communication, especially because of COVID-19, has turned into written, using software such as Slack or Discord or WhatsApp or Signal or Telegram. So you have to be able to write well. And communicating is also verbally being able to communicate your ideas is also very important, because let's say you have an idea, you sit down with your team and you need to present the idea in a way that they can understand, and that in a way that perhaps they can agree with you. So is writing more important? Is your written skills more important than your verbal? I don't know. I mean, I'd say 50-50. But reading is very important because you need to learn about new technologies. And Monis, please jump in at any time, like if you want to answer this question.
Also, I have a second question.
Yeah, go ahead.
My second question is, how has COVID-19 affected like your job? Like, is it making it more harder or like more easy?
So COVID-19 has definitely impacted this industry, not in a negative way though, I would say, but more in a positive way, because it's made it easy for people in different parts of the country that are perhaps not in those tech hubs that I talked about, right? That Monis and I mentioned, like, let's go back to this slide. So people who don't live in Silicon Valley or Austin or Portland or Seattle or New York City or Salt Lake City or other cities, it's made it possible for them to work remotely. So it's actually made it easier for remote people. That's one impact. Another impact of COVID-19 has been that companies, big companies such as Google and Facebook and Apple, they have become more work from home friendly. So initially, some of those companies didn't really believe in as much in work from home, but now they do because their employees have been working from home for over a year. So this is not specific to infrastructure engineering, but in general, it's made those companies more work from home friendly. So those are the two ways that it's impacted this particular industry. Does that help?
Yes, thank you so much.
Sure. Are there any terms you guys didn't understand that we used? I tried to sort of break down what DevOps means, what infrastructure engineering means, what AWS and GCP, and I tried to use simple terms like computers and hard drives, but are there any terms you guys didn't understand? No? Okay. Any other questions? We got 2 more minutes.
I guess I'll take that 2 minutes. So this terminology on-prem, is that now shifted to private cloud, or that's still two different things because it's not on-premise?
It's the same thing, on-prem and private cloud. It's a little bit more cooler to say private cloud. Technically, private cloud is really an installation of some software that can make it easy for you to create virtual computers and virtual storage in your own data center. Like the data center that I had explained to you earlier, where your computers are located, the building where the computers are located. So like OpenStack is the name of a software that can help you build a private cloud. But to be honest with you, it's not really used as much like that anymore. The on-prem term is being used less, and private cloud is being used more, but it's really a synonym at this point.
Okay, thank you. Someone has a question. Go ahead.
Yes.
Yeah, I was going to ask you, is it more important to be a good listener or more a good communicator as an infrastructure engineer?
So here's the example that I like to give. We have 2 ears and 1 mouth, right? And we should use those proportionately. So listen more than you speak in general, because that's how your body is designed. If you were designed to speak more than listen, perhaps you'd have 2 mouths. No, I'm just kidding with you on that. But in general, if you listen to someone with intent, with good intent, and try and understand their position, and you appreciate their thoughts and their opinions, you're more likely to build good relationships than to you're just sort of waiting for your turn to speak up. So to answer your question, is more important to listen to somebody or to speak your opinion? I'd say it's more important to listen and understand, try and understand what somebody's saying rather than just speak your own thoughts.
Also, is teamwork important in infrastructure engineering, or is it like you work separately?
Teamwork is important, although, you know, like I said earlier, introverts tend to do well in this industry because you're spending a lot of time with computers. But regardless of where you are, you'll always be in a team, and teamwork is impossible. Nobody likes people who are difficult to work with. So teamwork is essential no matter where you are, unless, I'm guessing, if you are farming in the middle of Ohio and you don't have to work with anybody. But no, teamwork is important. So learn to work with others in this field.
Thank you so much.
You're welcome. Anybody else?
So a lot of the times this position, at least in my perspective, can be a very high pressure situation. Like you are serving to millions of customers and things go down, don't work. Can you maybe talk a little bit aspect about that?
Yeah, so depending on the vertical segment, when I say vertical segment, like I mean like finance is a vertical segment, transportation is a vertical segment, and then medicine is a vertical segment, right? Depending on that, this can be a very high stress job. For instance, let's just pick google.com. I can't remember the last time google.com had gone down. I don't know if anybody here remembers. Like, since I've heard of Google, it's always been up pretty much. Maybe Gmail has gone down, but at least I don't remember Google going down. And imagine if Apple's website goes down, like it does billions of dollars of worth of revenue it generates for Apple. So there can be a lot of pressure on you to make sure that things go right. And if you don't like to work well under pressure, then you can still work in this industry, but you can work for internal websites that are not required to be highly available all the time. Like for instance, your HR website internally. You know, if it's down for half a day, it's not going to kill anybody, so to speak, right? You're not losing any revenue, right? This just means that your employees cannot go and process can process internal changes. I'm not talking about the software as a service that earlier I had mentioned. So figure out if you work well under pressure. If you do, then you can be part of teams that are user facing or revenue generating, as they're called. Revenue generating as in the sense that Google makes millions of dollars, if not billions, from google.com and the ads they show. So that's revenue generating. So that's high pressure, because if it goes down, they're literally losing money. If you don't like that kind of high stress environment, then work on the back end where, let's say you're maintaining maybe, like I mentioned, an internal website or a website that perhaps can be down for a while without loss of any revenue. Does that help?
Oh, thank you.
Sure. Any other questions? All right, so we're over by 5 minutes, but I guess we're still in time because we started at 12:05. So thank you everybody for attending. I'll share my email, and if it's okay with Monis, his email as well with the participants. You'll get all those who have registered. We'll send out an email with the contacts of all the 4 session speakers, and you know, feel free to reach out to us if you have any questions.
Thank you, Azher. Thank you, Monis.
Thank you. Thanks for
Thank
the
you. Good work. Thanks.
Assalamu alaikum.
There you go.